Star Wars and Indiana Jones have always had a strong connection thanks to George Lucas helping to create both franchises. I've done videos like this before, but new Easter eggs and connections keep popping up, and the release of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny seems like the perfect time to celebrate all of them. Starting with the films, the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark features a plane with the markings OB-CPO in honor of Obi-Wan Kenobi and C-3PO. Later on in the Well of Souls, hieroglyphics of 3PO and his counterbot R2-D2 can be seen etched into a pillar as Indy and Sala uncover the Ark of the Covenant. One of the government agents Indy meets at the start and end of the film is played by William Hootkins, who also played Jack Porkins in Star Wars A New Hope. The opening of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom contains another reference to Obi-Wan Kenobi, as the entire sequence takes place in a nightclub called Club Obi-Wan. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade features two Star Wars actors in prominent roles. Julian Glover plays the main villain Walter Donovan, and also played General Veers in The Empire Strikes Back. Michael Sheard plays Hitler, and first appeared as Admiral Ozzel in The Empire Strikes Back as well. In Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Indy delivers the line that's famously included in most of the Star Wars films, "I've got a bad feeling about this." Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny includes some more Star Wars actors in key roles of the film. Mads Mikkelsen plays the villain Jurgen Voller and also played Galen Erso in Rogue One. Phoebe Waller-Bridge plays Indy's goddaughter Helena Shaw and also played L337 in Solo: A Star Wars Story. Jumping over to Star Wars films, The Force Awakens has a very fun callback to Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Incredible Cross-Sections reference book states that there is a locked cargo container on Han and Chewie's freighter labeled with the number 9906753. That's the same number that labels the box that contains the Ark of the Covenant at the end of Raiders, so the implication is that the Ark could be on Han's freighter. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga recently included the Star Wars version of the Ark in the game on the freighter as well. Solo: A Star Wars Story includes the fertility idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark among Dryden Voss's collection of antiquities. Many fans have mistaken the Crystal Skull as part of that collection as well, but that's actually the skull of Zim the Despot, an artifact from the old Legends Han Solo adventure books. The Rise of Skywalker features Oma Trace, a bartender character played by John Williams. On the shelves behind him are references to all of his film scores, including Indy's Whip and the Sankara Stones. Jumping into Star Wars television, the Clone Wars series has several references back to Indiana Jones. It first introduced us to the idea that Star Wars does in fact have its own version of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ryloth Ark is a Twi'lek treasure that could first be seen in the episode Liberty on Ryloth. In the episode The Gungan General, the Grand Senator Karis carries a staff with a familiar headpiece at its top. It matches Marianne's medallion in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is the headpiece for the Staff of Ra. In the episode Hunt for Zero, Cy Snoodles makes her animation debut in a big musical number that is reminiscent of the big musical number that opens up the film Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. In Children of the Force, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Mace Windu make a narrow escape out of a closing door. Mace drops his lightsaber and uses the Force to retrieve it just before the door closes. That's similar to Indiana Jones barely rescuing his whip in Raiders of the Lost Ark, or barely rescuing his hat in Temple of Doom. Indy has a lot of run-ins with slowly closing doors. In the episode Wookiee Hunt, a Trandoshan trophy room features several valuable items. Among them is the Crystal Skull from Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. In Prisoners, Kit Fisto notes some deadly underwater creatures with the line, "Eels, very dangerous," a callback to Sala's line about the asps he and Indy discover in the Well of Souls. In Friends and Enemies, after escaping Republic Prison, Cad Bane is in need of a new hat. He briefly considers a familiar-looking fedora while inside a pawn shop. In Fugitive, a clone named Fives has to incapacitate his own brothers to escape, prompting the droid AZ-3 to say, "Look what you did! I cannot believe what you did!" which is almost word for word what Henry Jones Sr. says after witnessing his son shooting some Nazis. The episode The Disappeared Part 1 has some very strong similarities to the plot of the Temple of Doom, with the Fangral cult standing in for the Thuggee cult of the film. And instead of ripping out their victims' still-beating hearts, they magically steal their life force instead. Moving on to another animated series, Star Wars Rebels, the Holy Grail can be seen in the collection of Grand Admiral Thrawn, yet another admirer of the arts. So many Indiana Jones MacGuffins find their way into the hands of private collectors, but they belong in a museum. The Ryloth Ark makes a return in the episode The Winkathu Job, seen on board an abandoned Imperial cargo freighter. In the Season 4 episode Heroes of Mandalore, there's a speeder chase that is modeled after both the truck chase from Raiders of the Lost Ark and the tank chase from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. In Crawler Commanders, Zeb fights with an imposing Trandoshan named Proach. That character and his name is a reference to Pat Roach, who played a large Sherpa and the German mechanic in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Chief Guard in the Temple of Doom, and a Gestapo agent in The Last Crusade, although most of his scenes in the third film were cut. The second season of The Bad Batch had a ton of new indie references. The season premiere episodes feature a heist, and after Omega puts her life in danger for the sake of some treasure, she is told by Echo to let it go, a mirror of Henry Jones Sr. telling Indiana to let the Holy Grail go. The new character Fee Genoa describes herself as a liberator of ancient wonders. She is clearly inspired by Indiana Jones, and the episode Entombed sees her taking the Bad Batch on an indie-style adventure. On a distant planet, they find the entrance to a cave she calls Skara Nal. As they solve a puzzle to gain access, composer Kevin Kiner takes several musical cues from John Williams' score, specifically Indy solving the puzzle of the map room in Tanis in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Inside, Fee, Omega, and Hunter have to get past a booby trap that is very similar to the Word of God trap seen in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, with Hunter very nearly falling to his death upon their first attempt. After the near-death experience, he accuses Fee of making everything up as she goes, which is exactly what Indiana Jones announces he is doing in Raiders of the Lost Ark. As they reach the heart of the mountain, Fee prepares to take the treasure very much like Indy prepares to take the fertility idol at the start of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Omega watches on in anticipation like Satipo. The removal of the treasure causes chaos, just like the unsuccessful removal of the idol. After narrowly escaping, Fee begins talking of other treasures she has heard about, including a certain chalice that I have to assume is a reference to the Holy Grail. The episode Retrieval, like the Clone Wars episode that disappeared, once again takes cues from Temple of Doom. We see a group of child slaves working in a hellish mine, and the climax of the story takes place on a thin bridge over a massive chasm. The Temple of Doom references continue in the episode Pabu, where Fee Genoa makes a deal with a gangster in a nightclub, just like Indiana Jones making a deal with Lao She in Club Obi-Wan. Well, this time, if you translate the Arabesh outside of the club, you can see it's called Club Lao She. So now we're referencing an Indiana Jones character who first appeared in a nightclub that referenced a Star Wars character. This is one of my favorite Easter eggs on the list. Now let's move into live-action streaming series. I don't know if this next one is on purpose, but the second episode of The Mandalorian, The Child, features a chase with a sandcrawler that reminds me a lot of the tank chase in The Last Crusade. But Andor features some direct and very purposeful Indiana Jones Easter eggs. We meet a mysterious antiquities dealer named Luthen Rail. His shop, Galactic Antiquities and Objects of Interest, is full of Star Wars Easter eggs, but his back room is where he keeps the good stuff. Indy's whip can be seen encased in carbonite, as well as the fertility idol from Raiders. Out on a shelf, you can see the Sankara stones, the main treasure in Temple of Doom. Another collector, Doc-Ondar from Batuu and Galaxy's Edge, at least at one point had the Ark of the Covenant set aside in his private collection. Moving into books and comics, the Dr. Aphra series features several Indiana Jones references, which makes sense because the character is a rogue archaeologist. In her very first appearance, she can be seen running from a large rolling droid. She steals a weapon from a museum and claims that it belongs in an armory. Fans, including myself, have likened Aphra to Indiana, but really she's more like Belloc, the villain from Raiders of the Lost Ark. She is always seeking to claim treasure and power for herself, and recently it even resulted in her temporary death. In the first issue of her own comic, we see a man sneak into a temple and narrowly escape with its treasure, only to be shot by Aphra so she could take the artifact for herself. It's all very similar to the opening sequence of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Her ship, the Archangel, is also named after the Ark of the Covenant. Star Wars Legend stories have some fun indie connections as well. Some role-playing sourcebooks make reference to an archaeologist named Henrietta Antilles, also known as Corellia Antilles. Henrietta is a play on Indy's real name, Henry. Corellia is like the location-based nickname Indiana, and Antilles is a common name in the Star Wars galaxy, just like Jones is in the real world. One of Han Solo's mentors in Legends, a criminal named Garrus Shrike, sometimes went by the alias Genos Adanian, which is simply an anagram for Indiana Jones. In the Dark Nest trilogy of books, when Han Solo first meets the bug-like Killik species, he says, "Bugs. Why did it have to be bugs?" Han was scared of bugs, and the whole situation is a reference to Indiana Jones's fear of snakes. When he saw the Well of Souls was full of snakes and raiders, he delivered the similar line, "Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?" Finally, I have to point out the comic Into the Great Unknown, released in Star Wars Tales 19. It is not canon, even by Legend standards, but it shows Indiana Jones and Short Round discovering a crashed spaceship with a dead smuggler inside, and locals spread rumors of a Bigfoot-like creature that protected the site. And those are all the Indiana Jones and Star Wars Easter eggs I know about. I'm sure there are more that I've never heard of before, so let me know your favorites in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for mostly Star Wars content, follow us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and remember, it's not the years, it's the mileage.